Okay, now we continue with Frankie Fish and the Sonic Suitcase. We are up to chapter 9.
Yeah.
The other granddad is no better than this granddad.
Yeah.
The train soon arrived at a much bigger, busier station than the one where Frankie and Alfie had boarded. There was more hustle and a lot more bustle. People were getting on trains and people were getting off trains, some in a rush, others in a daydream. Frankie may have thought he was in a daydream, but he was definitely in a rush. Alfie tightly gripped the ruby Sonic suitcase with one hand and kept the other on Frankie's forearm as they weaved through the crowd. As they dashed along, a thought occurred to Frankie. "How did you win the race anyway, Grandad? It wasn't you in the car, was it?" he asked, trying to work out this mental jigsaw puzzle. "I mean, the you I'm talking to now." No, Frankie, it was the younger me driving." "Then how did you change the outcome of the race?" Grandpa looked a bit sheepish. "I just knocked on my door, and when I answered, I gave myself some advice." "You spoke to you?" "Yep," said the old man, fighting a naughty grin that Drew Bird would have been proud of. "I'd forgotten that I was such a handsome young devil." "What did you tell yourself?" "I simply told me to avoid the oil spill on the final corner. So now all I have to do to put things right is to stop me from knocking on that door." Alfie looked at his watch. "Which the other granddad is going to do in approximately 4 minutes, so we'd better hurry." They dodged the daydreamers and exited Glasgow Central Station with Grandad setting a cracking pace. "So how many of you are there right now?" Frankie asked while running, which is a rather tricky thing to do. It's for this very reason that schools don't teach algebra and cross-country at the same time. Grandad thought for a moment. "At this point there are 3. Me, the other Grandad, and the young Alfie." 3 Granddads? One was bad enough, Frankie thought to himself as he sprinted along. As they ran, Frankie caught his first glimpses of Glasgow in 1952. He had always imagined history being in black and white, or brown and yellow tint, but amazingly the world was in full colour. Some of the buildings still had damage from the war that Frankie had studied in history. The whole place looked run down and dirty. Frankie even saw a couple of rats fighting over a scrap of food in the gutter. The skies were grey and gloomy, but streets were filled with people, couples strolling arm in arm, families out for the day. There were children on their own, playing in puddles and chasing each other in and out of alleyways. Without a parent in sight, boys poked each other with sticks and girls skipped rope, chanting rhymes. Frankie shook his head, feeling sorry for them. They'd never get to play Minecraft or own a Game Boy. If only they knew what they were missing out on. "That's odd," Grandad muttered as they ran. "Could have sworn it was sunnier last time." "Huh?" said Frankie. "Never mind," Grandad huffed as he skidded around a corner. "We're here." They were standing on Hope Street, the very street where Alfie Fish had grown up and, in this moment in time, still did live with his parents and younger brother Roddy. Frankie had never seen anything like it. The houses were all squished up right next to each other, making one giant building that ran down the length of the street. Grandad made a beeline straight to number 42 at the end of the block. From behind him, Frankie saw their target, the other Grandad, with the other Sonic suitcase swinging off his hook, about to knock on young Alfie's door. Frankie could have fainted right there and then. The other Grandad was an exact replica of Grandad, and as unsurprising as that was in theory, in reality it freaked Frankie out a little. "Alfie!" yelled Grandad at the top of his lungs. "Don't do it!" Frankie joined the chorus. "Other freaky Grandad, you're about to make a big mistake." Other Grandad's face was perplexed as he saw himself running towards him with his annoying grandson in tow. He had a look on his face like he'd just been busted stealing Nana Fisher's sweets from her special hiding spot in the pantry. His knuckles hung in mid-air, just inches away from the Fish family door. "What are you doing?" other Grandad hissed. "And what in the blazes is the boy doing here? This is none of his business, and he'll probably leave boogers everywhere." "This is my business," Frankie hissed back. I've got the boogers under control, don't you worry," said Grandad, closing in. "Just get away from the door. You can't go through with this. The effects will be catastrophic." Grandad and Frankie stopped a few metres away, like police do in a hostage situation. Other Grandad looked like he was about to withdraw the clenched fist that lingered at the front door of the Fish family home. But then, as Other Grandad glanced down at his twin holding his sonic suitcase in his newly returned right hand, his face changed. His left and only fist tightened. "Knock, knock." "No," shouted Grandad. In one swift movement, he tossed the sonic suitcase to Frankie and lunged forward, wrapping Other Grandad in a rugby tackle. Then he hustled him away from the door and around the corner to a hidden pebbled alleyway. "What are you doing?" complained Other Grandad, struggling against his attackers. "Stopping you from making a big mistake, you old fool," Grandad grunted. "You changed the course of history and now everyone's gone. Mavis, Ron, everyone. Also me," Frankie added. "Probably." "But you got your hand back," Other Grandad said. "It wasn't worth it," Grandad replied firmly. "Trust me, we need to send you back. Having 3 of me in the same time dimension could be disastrous. We should never have broken the rules. Frankie, get Other Grandad's suitcase. We're sending him back and then we're going home too." "Right," said Frankie, and spun around to grab the ruby suitcase, except that it wasn't in the alley. Uh-oh. The other sonic suitcase was still in front of the house, where Other Grandad had dropped it. In perfect sync, the 2 Granddads said the exact same damp swear word. It wasn't hell or damn. Oh no. Chapter 10. Fishy Business. The 3 fishmen collectively gulped and poked their heads around the corner like a set of terrible traffic lights. Just in time to see the front door of the Fish family house opening, all 3 retreated faster than a rabbit after drinking too much red cordial. The 2 Granddads and Frankie stood as still as silently as possible, listening carefully. Somebody stepped outside and there was a scraping noise that sounded suspiciously like a suitcase being picked up off the ground. Then a cat's meow pierced the cold Glasgow air. "Oh, that's Mr. Wallace, our cat," whispered Grandad. "He was a cranky little thing, hated strangers and always used to steal our black pudding." "What's black pudding?" Frankie whispered. "A sausage made from blood." Frankie gagged. Why would any person or cat eat, let alone steal, such a thing? Yuck! The next moment, Mr. Wallace came slinking around the corner. He stared up at the 3 fishmen frozen awkwardly against the wall, and then went right over to Other Grandad and started purring loudly. "Mr. Wallace, is that ye purring?" someone called from around the corner. It sounded like a young man, maybe a young Alfie Fish. "Have you found a little friend?" Mr. Wallace meowed happily and loudly. Frankie closed his eyes, imagining the universe imploding at the exact moment the 3 Alfie Fishes laid eyes on each other. "Mr. Wallace," the young man said again. Wash up for lunch," came a woman's voice from inside the house. After another long, painful moment, they heard footsteps going back inside and the door closing with a bang. The 3 fishmen breathed a sigh of relief, but the drama was just beginning. Once again, the 3 poked their heads around the corner and gave a collective gasp as they all saw the same thing. Nothing. The other sonic suitcase was gone. Grandad groaned loudly. "This is a disaster," Frankie cried. Other Grandad didn't seem to get it. "It's okay, we still have this one," he said, patting Grandad's sonic suitcase. And that's when Frankie found some of his Grandad's fireball ways. "No, it's not okay at all," he scolded. "Haven't you seen The Terminator, or Back to the Future, or the 3rd Harry Potter movie, or even Doctor Who?" "Who?" replied the other Grandad, confused. "Exactly," replied Frankie. "We cannot leave a time machine in the hands of an unknowing people from the past. Anything could happen." He sighed and shook his head. "We need to send you home. The longer you stay, the worse the odds that trouble will find us." "But what if I don't want to go home?" asked Other Grandad. "What?" came the dual voices of Grandad and Frankie. "I like it here. My memory is clearer. I feel more like myself," Other Grandad said, staring off into the distance. "The world feels safer than it does back home, too. And they'll probably let me drive as much as I want." Then he leaned heavily against the wall. There was a long silence. Frankie glanced at Grandad and saw from his face that he felt the same way as his time-travel twin, at least a little bit. Frankie leaned next to Other Grandad. "I think I get what you mean, old Other Grandad," he said gently. I do. See, I made a mistake and now my school hates me, which is why I had to come and stay with you for the school holidays, even though I didn't want to. No offence. But even though I never want to go back to school, I know I have to, because that's where my best friend Drew Bird is, and that's where my mum goes to pick me up, and where my annoying sister Lou is." Frankie swallowed. He'd never thought it'd be possible, but he actually missed his dumb family. You need to go home, get me, and come back, other Grandad, so that we can stop you from ruining everything, he said firmly. Nana Fish needs you. His two granddads stared at him in astonishment. Frankie had surprised even himself with that speech, given that he wasn't much of a public speaker. The last time he'd done an oral presentation was in history class. He was supposed to talk about Apollo 13, and he'd vomited from nerves before the shuttle left Houston. It wasn't a small vomit either. He blew chunks, hard chunks. Some carrot even landed on Mr. Balcone's leather shoes, which was weird because Frankie couldn't even remember the last time he'd eaten carrots. Other Grandad looked up, his eyes welling with tears. "But I'm scared," he whispered. "So am I," Frankie whispered back. "But would be super weird if we weren't scared, considering the circumstances, right?" He smiled hopefully at Other Grandad. Then something bizarre happened. Other Grandad smiled back. "You're right," said the old man. "I'll go home with this suitcase. You two can go recover mine." Then he took their sonic suitcase and squinted at the combination lock. 52% battery. That'll be more than enough. It loses its charge the longer you stay, but you only need 17% to get back. "I know," Grandad interrupted Other Grandad. "Just go already." And with the typing in of some coordinates, the use of the neighbour's backyard toilet without permission, and a muttered "happy travels," the Other Grandad was gone.